Voiceover is everywhere, and you hear it every day. From radio.
Number one for New Country 96.3 Hawkeye in the morning.
To TV.
Alpha, Readers Escape. Recruit a team of teenagers with attitudes.
To movies.
I see you have constructed a new lightsaber. Your skills are complete.
To animation.
And games, Spider-Man!
And so much more.
I don't want to grow up, 'cause baby, if I did, I couldn't be a Toys R Us kid.
Welcome to episode 23.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at the world of voiceover, including movies, TV, animation, and more. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today's special guest is a wife, a mom, and an actress, and she is also the daughter of Chris Latta. That's correct. A lot of you may know him as Chris Latta, but it's actually pronounced Chris Latta, who is best known for his roles as Starscream and Cobra Commander. Here are some clips.
My time will come, Megatron.
Never! Your knowledge is only overshadowed by your stupidity, Starscream.
Please, don't fire. I was wrong. I shouldn't have done it. Please, don't shoot. Megatron! You misjudge me if you think I'm motivated solely by selfishness. Why should we war among ourselves when we have G.I. Joe for a common enemy? In fact, I order you to create this perfect Cobra leader so I too may follow him to victory! Cobra!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice? Today on the show we have Abby Cluster joining us today. Abby, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Hey, it is my pleasure. You know, the very first thing we always like to do when we start our show out, Abby, is just to get a little background on who our actress is, or actor of the day is, and just tell us a little bit about you growing up, and how did you get into this crazy world of acting and voice acting?
I started out, probably my first foray into performing was I took dance classes as a kid and stuff like that, and that led me into doing some musical theater. Which was one of my favorite things in the whole world to do. And my when I was in my teens, I did a lot of theater in and out of school and some professional stuff. And then I discovered that I really liked. My father was, as most of your listeners probably know, was a voiceover actor. His name was Chris Latta. He went by Chris Latta and Chris Collins. And I was listening to some of his old stuff, and I was just kind of like, this is something I'm super interested in. And so as I was kind of moving on, I actually found an old box of his scripts and like call sheets and that kind of stuff. And I started kind of just looking through them and just like going through on Facebook and just kind of seeing like who was still working and who was like kind of researching stuff. And I sent out some direct messages to some people and heard back from some people who worked on Transformers with him, and it was a crazy time, because it was like a couple weeks before my wedding, and like all sorts of nut stuff was going on. And I got put in contact with someone who works, Pete Sinclair, who works for BotCon, which is the Transformers convention.
Yeah.
And he asked if I wanted to come and do a voice on a panel for them, and like kind of meet some of my dad's fans and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so I ended up reading this like fan comic on a panel with like Neil Ross and Morgan Lofting and David Kay and Greg Berger and all of these so it was like me and all of these amazing, talented voiceover actors.
Absolutely, yeah.
In front of like 1,000 people, and that was my very first thing I ever did that was voiceover related.
Wow, that is super epic.
Yeah, so I guess it'd be going, from it was kind of trial by fire, but it was one of the most amazing and crazy and whirlwind experiences I've ever had, and it definitely lit a fire under my butt, being like, yep, that's what I want to do. This is the most fun thing I've ever done in my life, and I'm going to pursue it.
That is fantastic, Abby. Thank you so much for sharing just a little bit of your background. And for those of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's kind of a fun story, and it's a fun. That's always going to be one of my favorite memories as I continue to like pursue this. That I've gotten to, jump in and work with some amazing people right off the bat.
I mean, what an amazing start. I mean, I don't think you can get much more incredible than that.
Yeah.
A panel of like iconic voice actors, and you're just sitting there going, wow, I'm new to this. This is so awesome.
Yeah. It was pretty insane.
Yeah, I know. I would have been flipping out like, holy cow, this is crazy. But for those of you who don't know, Abby's father, Chris Latta, was the voice of Starscream and the voice of Cobra Commander from G.I. Joe, and an extremely epic and very familiar voice to a lot of people who grew up in the 80s and 90s, and even people today if you're a fan of those franchises. Abby, you were kind of talking about being a dancer, which led into theater. And I know right now you're actually in a theatrical production called Hairspray as the lead female actress, Tracy Turnblad. What is that like, getting to be part of such a very up and coming, epic, pretty amazing musical?
It's a part that I never thought I would really get an opportunity to play, because I'm a little bit older for playing Tracy, but I happen to be blessed in that I play much younger on stage.
Yeah.
And it is truly a dream come true to be able to play this part, especially now. Like, it's got such a positive message and such an upbeat and fun way of presenting things that are important issues that are still important issues today, like racism and how to kind of overcome obstacles and really pursue your dreams, which is something that I feel like most people can relate to.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But it is a challenge doing that part. In act 1, I leave the stage for maybe a minute and a half at one point, and in act 2, I have one song that I'm off stage for. But other than that, I'm constantly on stage dancing and singing, and it's from top to finish. It's probably one of the most challenging experiences, but one of the most rewarding experiences I've had in theater so far.
Well, that is fantastic to hear. And I know some of the other productions you've been able to be a part of are stuff like The Chorus Line, Music Man, Annie Get Your Gun, and one called Marvelous Wonderettes. Could you tell us a little bit about that show, and what did you play in that particular production?
Yeah, it was actually such a fun show. It's set in the 1950s and 60s. It's only 4 people in the cast. It's 4 women. And in the first act, we are at our high school prom, and we're all vying for prom queen. And it's what's called a jukebox musical. So we're actually singing hits from the 50s. And then the second act, we come back 10 years later at their high school reunion. And the girls are all kind of catch up on where they are as friends, where their lives have gone. And then we're singing songs from the 60s. So and the character that I played was Susie Simpson, and she is she's the character-y character. She has a very
She talks the way up here. She's very high pitched, and she's like, oh my gosh, she's a little bit ditzy.
And throughout the first act, actually the whole act, she chews bubble gum, and so that was a challenge, is learning how to chew and blow bubbles all the time while singing. So that was pretty funny.
Oh wow! So you actually had gum.
Yeah, I had gum in my mouth for the whole first act, which was kind of funny. And then she actually comes back in the second act. Her character is 8 months pregnant. So then I had to have a fake pregnancy belly that I wore for that. So it's a pretty funny character. And halfway through the second act, she breaks out of that little girl voice and actually sings this big, huge, belty, soulful. She actually sings "Respect" by Aretha Franklin at the end of the show. So it's pretty funny to get to play with that kind of turn in your voice as well.
Absolutely. Your character had such a diverse aspect to her that you were able to do tons of stuff physically and vocally. That's fantastic.
That's pretty fun.
Well, it sounds like a pretty awesome musical. And I know I've seen some of the pictures on your Facebook, and I was like, I wonder what this is from. And then kind of talking before the show, when you mentioned it, I was like, well, that is fantastic. I love the 40s and 50s, the music in those eras and the dress and everything. It's just fantastic. Great. Great. I think the way the costumes were just very unique to culture in our society. So
totally. Yeah.
So as far as voiceover goes, I know you haven't really been able to dive into into animation and everything like your father yet, but you have been able to use your voice for industrial and educational videos for companies such as Pepsi, and maybe you like doing a video for like investors, you know, trying to help them kind of come on board with a project that Pepsi or whatever company might be trying to pitch. And what kind of voice do you like train for or prepare for to do those videos? Is it kind of robotic? Is it kind of, you know, I don't know, dive into it a little for me.
You know what's funny is it actually was something that I never thought about as an aspect of a voiceover like career. Like, you know, when you first start thinking about it, you're like, oh, animation, and that's what voiceover is. But voiceover is used in like so many different aspects of your daily life that you may not even like think about.
Yeah.
Because like one job that I do is I locally here, I'm the voice of the Ventura County Credit Union. And so like I do their web spots and I do stuff for them. But one of the things I do is like I do their hold messages as well. So like, you know, when you call and you listen and you're like, I'm like, let me tell you about our low APR and financing. Like, and it's just funny because for something like an industrial, it really depends. Again, it's just like animation in that it depends on what the client's looking for. Sometimes they do want something a little bit different or more charactery, and sometimes they want something that's very straightforward.
Yeah.
But it really made me learn how to be comfortable in my own voice, which is really what they want. A lot of things for something like that is they want something real. They want someone who's sounds trustworthy and honest and not fake and not showy and not salesperson-y.
Yeah.
But it's really such an interesting aspect of it in that you have to sound professional and you have to sound like you know what you're talking about. But like, you know, I just got all the copy the day before. Like, so it just depends. But so honestly, like it's really helped me find confidence and a comfort in my natural speaking voice that I really didn't have before I kind of got into that. You know, I was always being silly and creating these silly characters and like making funny noises and all this stuff when I would be just in normal conversation, just as it, you know, sometimes I think just as regular people, it's hard to be confident and just comfortable with yourself.
Absolutely.
And so that aspect of working in that part of the voiceover industry has really made me feel just more confident in my everyday speaking and not feeling like I have to put on a character all the time.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I know a lot of voice actors that I've talked to have said sometimes they feel more awkward using their own voice than they do becoming a character.
Totally. Being a character is easy because it's something you kind of have more control over. Whereas like when you have to be yourself, you're like, oh, well, this is just me. And I hope you like me the way I am. Like, it's so, it's a little bit bearing all, but it's more and more comfortable the more I do it.
That's fantastic. Well, you know, sometimes it's when we break into those things that we're not as familiar with, or those things that we didn't know really existed, that we break out of our comfort zones, become more confident, become more, you know, in the know about our professions. And then when we finally get to something that we have a deeper passion for already before that, it just makes it that much more exciting when we finally get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've got some pretty cool stuff coming down the pike that I'm actually, you know, not allowed to talk about yet, but it's been a great, like, you know, this year has started off in a place where I never could have imagined that I'd be in these, you know, rooms with these people and you know, getting callbacks and stuff for stuff that I would like, you know, like watch when I was a kid and be like, oh, I want to do that. And like now I'm like part of it, and it's just so it's so fun and silly and really quite amazing where your life can take you if you really stick to pursuing stuff that makes you happy.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Abby. Well, you know, it sounds like you are holding out a little bit on me, but I understand with the NDA and everything.
I know, I'm sorry. I promise when I can, I will.
You know, but it's so funny because Daniel Ross told me the exact same thing on our first interview, the one that mentioned you on our 4th episode, and said, I got to have Abby on the show. And I was like, man, that would be fantastic. And, you know, I know that sometimes you're working on these amazing projects and you just have to hold them in and you're dying to tell people, but hey, we'll have to have you back when all of that comes out and let everyone know.
I'll be happy to. I'll jump at that opportunity for sure to be able to talk about more exciting stuff. But you know, it's what I like about voiceover and just acting in general, because, you know, I don't just do voiceover, like I do a lot of theater and that kind of work too. And it's so much fun because it's hard work, and it's very it's, you have to have a lot of self-confidence, and you have to have a lot of resilience, because you're going to get told no 100 times over before you get one yes. And then you get that one yes and you're like, okay, I got the yes. And then you're going to hear no again, like 100 more times. Like, you have to, like, you just have to be able to, like, hold on to the things that make you happy and have other things that fill you up too. Like, I have 2 kids, and being, I'm very involved in their school, and I have my husband who I adore, and, we try to fill our lives in places that it doesn't, that the no's don't mean everything.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's amazing that you are a mom, a wife, and an actress. You've got a full plate and you juggle it well. But it's got to be a lot of fun to be, not just an actress, but a mom and a wife, and to have those little kiddos that you have. And I know being a mom is one of the biggest joys most women would say they have in their lives as well.
Absolutely. And it's so funny seeing, like, my oldest is 5, and I have to try my hardest not to, like, when he loves fiddling with, he has all the, action figures and all this stuff, and he very silly, and he makes silly voices and makes loud noises and all this stuff, and part of me is like, oh, be quiet. And then I'm like, wait, no, like, this is, like, you get paid to do that, like, you need to let him be silly to do, like, it's, like, yeah. Rob, I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned before, but, like, I used to help work on, when Rob Paulson was doing his live podcast out of the Improv for Talkin' Tunes, like, I would help him work on that show. And so I got to be a fly on the wall there and listen to all these amazing guests and all the stuff that he would have on the show. And, I got to do an episode of his podcast as well with a couple other younger up and coming actors and stuff. But he always says he's getting paid to do the stuff he used to get in trouble to do when he was a kid. And it's not wrong. Like, and so, like, part of me is like, sometimes I'm like, oh, just be quiet. And I'm like, wait, no, like, I think of that every single time I want to, squash the noise. And then I'm like, wait, but this is, this could lead, who knows? This could lead to an outstanding career one day if I let you keep playing in that silly voice for the next 2 hours. Who knows what it could be.
Absolutely. Make it a 3rd generation voice actor.
Right, exactly. Yeah, totally. Like, and he's quite the character. So I would think I'd be hard pressed to keep him away from it, I think.
Well, I believe your son and you went to Trolls, and when you came home, you ended up doing your hair like a troll.
True, yeah. We do dive in full force when he gets into something. He was like, Mommy, can we do poppy hair? And I'm like, yeah, why not? Let's figure that out. Stick a soda bottle in there and put it up high and have fun with it.
Yeah, I saw that picture on Facebook and I laughed so hard. I like, that is so awesome.
Yeah. What's the point in having kids if you don't get to play with them sometimes,
Oh, I totally agree. I am totally looking forward to the day my wife and I have some children, because I've always longed to be a father. So
it's quite the journey and a lot of work, but it's the most fun. I literally get to just play all day, whether it's voiceover or on the floor with my actual children. Like, you just, if you get to play every day in your life, then you're not doing anything too hard.
It sounds like it. Well, yeah. Abby, speaking of fathers, let's talk about Chris, your father, a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was it like being a part of that family with Chris? I mean, I know he was such a warm-hearted man from what I've heard, and a comedian, and he's done some amazing voices, but what was it like actually being the daughter of Chris Collins?
He had passed away when I was about 8.
Okay.
But he was a force to be reckoned with, for sure. He was a big man in stature, a big man in voice, and a big man in personality. But he was, first and foremost, he was our dad, and he was silly and fun and playful. And he was gone a lot because he would go on tour he would go on comedy tours and stuff like that. One of my favorite stories about him was when I was, I must have been probably 6. He was the assistant coach of my baseball team, because I played baseball when I was a kid. I was the only girl on my team. I refused to play softball. I wanted to play baseball. So I was the only girl on my baseball team. He was our assistant coach, and he would occasionally, like, yell at us, like, as Cobra Commander or like Starscream, and like the kids would just, their jaws would drop and just be like, what? So that was always a fun parlor trick or whatever, like just to get, he used to love to see the looks on kids especially faces when they would hear one of their favorite characters just come out of a person. He did a lot of like, he would, do phone calls for kids who were in hospitals and that kind of stuff. I always thought was really cool. Just, he was a warm-hearted and giving person. And I feel very lucky to have had him as my, had that kind of joy in my house when I was a kid. He was fun and silly and, maybe to the chagrin of my mother, sometimes a little bit of a character and a goofball. Couldn't take anything too seriously, but you can't take life too seriously. You'll never get out alive.
Yeah. I think your father and I would have gotten along really well. He sounds like the kind of characteristics that I have. And I think from what I've heard and from hearing your stories and having those confirmed, I think he was one heck of a guy. And I wish I would have had the opportunity to get to know him. But the best way I can do that now is to learn a little bit from you. But, I see your dad out there on the field coaching, and the other team is running to their bases. And all your dad does is scream, "Decepticons attack!" And the kids are just freaking out. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's pretty
something
funny.
Like that.
It's just he was a larger than life human being, and he lived his life hard and full. So it was I feel very lucky to call him my dad.
Well, I think that is extremely special to hear, Abby. And, living life hard and full is how we should all live our lives, because life is extremely precious, and we should always get the most out of life as much as possible, I think. So.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the point if you're not working at it and living it up?
Absolutely. So for you, when your dad was playing Starscream and Cobra Commander, what was it like for you knowing that was your dad? I mean, did kids ask you about it at school, or how did that go?
It's so funny because it kind of like, it didn't seem like such a big deal to me. That was your dad's a police officer and he goes to his job, and my dad's a Decepticon and he goes to his job. I don't know, like it just when you're that age, I feel like it doesn't. That's just my dad, and that's just what he does.
Yeah.
In hindsight, it's kind of funny. I realized it was not just a normal job that any dad went and did during the day. But when I was a kid, that's all it was. That was he was like, okay, well, I'm going in for a session. I'm like, all right, bye. Like, I'm going to school. Like, it just doesn't seem as weighty. And you don't really kind of understand that. Like, I always knew that that cartoons had voiceover actors, and I always knew them as people as opposed to like cartoon characters. Because it's just, that's where that's the same thing. My son does the same thing. He'll be like, well, who's the voice of, like, he'll be watching a show, be like, who's the voice of Poppy in Trolls? And like, he associates it with a human being more so than like, that's a real character.
Yeah.
Like he's fascinated by he's actually fascinated. He likes to play with my microphone a lot and stuff. I think I'm going to be hard pressed to keep him away from following in the family tradition, I suppose.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, with your son's fascination, it sounds a lot like mine. Like, whenever I heard a voice, I would either say, man, that voice is the exact same as this other character I know. Or if it's like,
totally, yeah. Or
if it was like Marvin the Martian or something, and like the voice sounded different, you'd be like, why does he not sound the same?
Like, right. It's funny. It's, I always just have assumed that everyone understands how voiceover works, just because it's just, when you live a certain life, like, you're like, this is normal.
Yeah.
But like, I had a friend recently who'd be like, okay, I have a question. When people do voiceover, do they like change people's voices with the computer, or does one person actually like do a bunch of, I'm like, no, usually like if you see one person that does different voices, it's not, they haven't altered it in any way. Like, it's just, it's their ability. Like, they have this range and ability to do all this different stuff. And they're always just like, what? And I'm like, yeah, like, which, like, that's crazy. And I'm like, I know, but that's kind of what we do. So it's kind of funny to realize that it's not common knowledge for everybody, that it's just, that people are crazy talented and it's have quite a variety of what they can accomplish with these little vocal cords.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny, speaking of people kind of not always knowing about the biz, I was talking to these kids standing in line to watch the new Power Rangers movie, and I was explaining what I do, and they were like, what? Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
And then, when I explain
What's
it,
a pod?
what's a pot? Yeah, that was the first question. But, then I handed them my card and they were like, what's this? No, but, so, the kids were asking, like, what is voiceover? And, talking about like a character on the actual Michael Bay films who played in Transformers. And they said, you mean those aren't done by a computer? Like they just thought it was something computer generated, like the voice of Siri or something, which is also an actress, but they thought it was more of a robotic type thing. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. I would have never thought that, but coming from my perspective and having a different understanding of voiceover and from someone who didn't, I never would have thought of that different perspective. So it is interesting how other people perceive it.
It's kind of cool how I feel like I have this little bit of knowledge that I can impart on people when they ask me, like, yes, I do know about that. Thank you for asking. Here's a like,
aha, my knowledge is useful.
Yes, my knowledge is useful.
Which leads into that nerdy aspect that you and I both share.
Yes. I like having nerdy knowledge and being able to share it with the masses. It's like fun.
I know everything about the Enterprise, but when is it going to help me?
Yeah, right? This is your moment. This is the moment it helps you. Congratulations.
Oh, wow. So what kind of advice, Abby, would you have for a young aspiring actress or actor who might be looking at joining this crazy world of acting and voiceover?
My biggest thing is, if you wake up every day and you can't think or you can't do anything but that, then pursue it, because it's not an easy job and it's not an easy road. But if it's what lights your fire and it's what gets you happy and moving and passionate about your life, then go for it. If you're passionate about other things that have like a real career path, maybe try that. But if it's something you just can't stay away from and you can't not do it, then I think it's worth going after, because it's a hard life sometimes, but it every day I wake up and I'm so blessed to be able to go out to my little studio in my garage and, even send out, I feel blessed when I get an audition from my agent. I'm like, yay, I get to try this today. And every day that I have the opportunity to put my voice on an MP3 and send it out and hope that it gets to someone who wants to hear it. And honestly, like, just the opportunity to just have fun in the audition is such a blessing to me every day. So I can't, if you can't do anything else, if you can't think of anything else, you wake up and it's something you can't stay away from, then just every day try a little harder and you'll get there. It's quite a roller coaster, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
Well, I think that advice is super fantastic. Pursuing something that you just have an undying passion for is definitely the way to go. If you don't follow your heart's desire, if you don't follow the dreams that you're passionate about 24/7, then what's life all about? Do you have any social media that people can reach out to you, whether they have questions or maybe they're even interested in hiring you for a project, maybe possibly a Transformers or a G.I. Joe project even?
Hey, I will take it. My Twitter is at @A_Ryan C. And so I'm on my Twitter a lot. People can find me on Facebook, Abby Cluster. But yeah, what's funny is, like, you've ever heard this term, like the shoemaker's kids go barefoot?
Yeah.
Like, my husband is actually like a social media like marketer. That's what he does. And I'm like, oh, I don't really, I'm not very good at remembering to like update things. But like, I'm working on a new website and that'll be abbycluster.com. But it's under construction right now because I'm terrible at getting on my computer and actually doing things with it. But I am working. That is something I'm working on getting better at. It's a constant, it's one other thing to add to the fire of my everyday balancing act. But definitely on Twitter and Facebook. You can find me on Twitter and Facebook for sure.
Fantastic. Well, it's absolutely awesome that you were able to get abbycluster.com, because the .com alone is amazing, and that someone else didn't steal your name for some reason.
Right.
But that's awesome. Huh?
My name.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know so many actors will be like, yeah, I couldn't get my own name. I'm like, how dare they?
Luckily, Cluster isn't too popular of a last name.
Yeah. Yeah. It is pretty unique.
my name is Mary Smith, and I would like to purchase marysmith.com. Never.
You
Sorry,
and
guys.
5,000 other people.
You and 10 million other human beings.
Well, Abby, I have 2 final questions for you today, and we'll wrap this interview up. The first of the 2 is, what was your favorite cartoon or cartoon character from growing up, and why?
Oh man, that's hard. Oh man, one of my favorite show growing up probably was Animaniacs. So every day that I get to say that I'm friends with Rob Paulson actually makes my brain explode. But Animaniacs, and I really like Dot on Animaniacs.
Trust
I don't
McNeil.
know, oh God, she's just a goddess, and she's just a gift to she's a gift to women who kick ass, honestly. Like she just
she's a legend.
She's a legend, and I've been blessed to have the opportunity to meet with her and talk with her, and she's such an incredibly kind person. That's really what she is at her core. But I would have to say Dot from Animaniacs. She's a huge, and then my other thing is I am a diehard Minnie Mouse fan. I'm a diehard Minnie Mouse fan, and I love all the work that Rusy's done with that character, Rusy Taylor, who I haven't had the opportunity to meet, but if I ever did, that would be people are like, oh, this person, I don't think I could talk. I think that I'm so incredibly starstruck if I had the opportunity to meet her that I might pass out.
You should ask Daniel Ross to give you the hookup with Rusy.
I've thought about it, but I literally would be like, you know what? I think I'd die. I think I'd pass out. I feel like I would totally make a fool out of myself, and I'd just be like, and everyone has that one person that if they had the opportunity to meet them, they might not survive. And I'm a diehard Minnie Mouse fan.
That is too cute. The last question I have for you today, Abby, is what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Be kind and work hard. That's it. I think be kind and work hard are I think, unfortunately, I guess some days it feels like not everyone feels that way, but I feel like being kind to people and working hard every day is really all you can do to have a full life.
Absolutely. I think that's fantastic, Abby. It's simple, but it's so powerful at the same time.
Yeah.
I have one quick thing I wanted to say. When you were talking about how Rob Paulson made your mind explode, knowing that him and the Animaniacs is one of your favorites, I was thinking about those commercials in the 80s and 90s where the kids would eat those sour candies and the top of their head would literally explode because it was so sour.
The
Warheads, right? That's it. That's the ones.
Yeah.
And it was around the era of Animaniacs. And so I was just flashing back to my childhood when you said that. I was like, little me, and I was watching the TV on the big old school TV that wasn't a flat screen.
Right, the one that sat on the floor and not on the wall.
Yeah, on Saturday morning cartoons, because that's all we got, kids.
Heck yeah. Now you can watch cartoons. I go on Netflix and I'm see my kid, and he's like, can we watch this episode of this show? And I'm like, you don't know how good you have it. Old you. I'm like, yeah, sure, we can watch whatever episode of whatever show you want, because it's just right here at the internet.
You can just sit down and binge watch Animaniacs now.
Exactly. What's funny is my kid loves Animaniacs. That's one of my favorite things about being a parent, is getting to go back and watch all the shows that I watched when I was a kid, and get to see my kid watch them, because that's just too fun.
But it turns you back into a kid while you're watching with your kid.
I know. It's so cool.
Because I do it with my nieces and nephews and little brothers and sisters, because I'm one of 5 kids, so I know how it is. It's magical.
Pretty awesome.
Well, Abby, I cannot thank you enough for your valuable time. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on the show today. Would you please just do me the honor of closing out today's episode?
Absolutely. You've been listening to Who Did That Voice, and I'm Abby Cluster, and I thank you for listening to my story.
Well, everyone, I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode with Abby Cluster and this tribute to Chris Latta. And if you did, please find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching Who Did That Voice. I would love to hear from you. Hey everyone, and thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Who Did That Voice. If you enjoyed today's episode, please check us out online on all social media platforms at Who Did That Voice, and on YouTube at Who Did That Voice 24. Also, remember to check out our website, whodidthatvoice.org. Again, that's www.whodidthatvoice.org. Thank you to all my listeners out there. I just wanted to say, if you want to partner with Who Did That Voice, just telling your friends and family about us is the best way to share the show with others. And or leaving us a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast from. The third and final way is by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/Who Did That Voice.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.